Despite Amazon and the mainstream media's best efforts to lie about fans, to hide from the backlash, to try to pretend that everything was just fine and incredible about Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power Season 1, the most expensive series in the history of television, nearly $1 billion just for one season of this garbage, there's no doubt that it was a catastrophic failure. We saw the audience reaction. People rolled their eyes. People blasted it. They thought that this was absolutely horrendous. And we saw the typical Hollywood game. If you don't like this, if you don't like what Amazon has done to these characters, if you don't like the fact that they bastardized them, that they race swapped them, that they destroyed them all for the sake of identity politics, that they made up things in the world of J.R.R. Tolkien, that they destroyed Lord of the Rings lore. If you didn't like that, you're just a bigot. You're just a racist. That must be why you had a problem with what Amazon did. Well, here we are several months removed from that catastrophe. Season 2, well on the way. No idea when that's going to come out. Well, Warner Brothers, the ones who made the Lord of the Rings movies back in the early 2000s with Peter Jackson that are loved by so many people, they've decided that, you know what? I think we're going to do something with Lord of the Rings too. Warner Brothers just destroyed the Rings of Power. With Warner Brothers working on a new Lord of the Rings movie in the near future, this news has possibly destroyed the future of Rings of Power. And if they really wanted to, they certainly could. This is basically Warner Brothers getting their dick out and putting it on the table and saying, hey, we've got a lot of stuff that we could do with the Lord of the Rings too. And it would be hilarious if they did some of the things that Rings of Power is doing so wrong. If they actually tackled, the War of the Last Alliance. If they actually tackled some of these things that Rings of Power doesn't actually have the rights to, but are trying to do anyway. Well, it turns out Warner Brothers has a lot of those rights. They have a lot of rights to characters and stories that people actually want to hear, not fan fiction bullshit that Amazon is putting out. But this was the announcement just a day ago. New Lord of the Rings movies set at Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers Pictures is revamping the Lord of the Rings film franchise. On a Thursday earnings call, Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav announced that newly installed studio leaders have brokered a deal to make multiple films based on the beloved J.R.R. Tolkien books. The projects will be developed through WB labeled New Line Cinema, and we know what happened with the first Lord of the Rings trilogy, and then of course we had the Hobbit movies as well. And as the other article points out, it seems Warner Brothers wants to take advantage of the success and fame of the Lord of the Rings franchise once again, even if this may affect the future and success of Amazon's Rings of Power. The studio announced its intention of making more Lord of the Rings films. In fact, not only does Warner Brothers intend on making a new Lord of the Rings movie, but it also seems to be in a similar time frame to the much beloved Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. This could be bad news for Rings of Power. Warner Brothers are reportedly working on the movies related to Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, building upon their success and love for the Tolkien saga. They are likely going to be set in a similar time frame, headed back to the Third Age. I certainly don't think it's out of the question for them to go, a little bit late in the Second Age, something like that. Who knows? Who fucking knows? Now, I personally think that we should be worried about these. I don't trust them to make good movies right now. I don't trust anybody to treat Lord of the Rings well right now. And what did we hear? We of course heard some, key words and tricky phrases. Warner Brothers Discovery to create new Lord of the Rings films that will, quote, honor the past, look to the future, and adhere to the strongest levels of quality. Two of those things sound great, but when you hear look to the future, that isn't inherently a bad thing at all. It's a fine thing. What it sometimes means in current day Hollywood is just like what we saw with Rings of Power. It's a bastardization of something that came before it, all for the sake of representation, of identity politics. What these movies are about, what they look like, what it's motivated by, that all remains to be seen. I think there's a good reason to be worried about what they might do. But for right now, you can't help but think about how Amazon might be panicking right now. How the people who actually gave you something that you wanted, albeit 20 years ago when it came to the Lord of the Rings trilogy, that they might be willing to do something else, that they might actually have rights to do things that people want to see, that they might actually stay true to the books, not make up all this bullshit. And if that's the case, this could spell disaster for Amazon's Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. It was already a terrible first season in terms of what this should have done compared to what it did do ratings-wise. But now, with this new revelation of what Warner Brothers is going to do, Amazon should be panicking right now, and likely they are. Let me know your thoughts about all this in the comment section below. Smash a like button, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications, share this video out there, and I'll talk to you later.